And a surprise to no one that's been following along, but at least it's finally official. Executives with the college football playoff made it official yesterday. They unanimously voted to change the seating structure of the college football playoff. So it's getting a little makeover. 8772 Radio U, the new format will seed teams just purely based off of seeding instead of giving the top four the buys to the four conference champions.
Yep.
Now those five conference champions still guaranteed to get in, but they could be seeded anywhere. You could literally potentially in this format have a number one seed that didn't win their conference under unusual circumstances.
Yeah, I think that would be pretty rare, but I like this move. Mm-hmm. I think it was needed. I think it was necessary after our first time out with the 12-team playoff last season. Mm-hmm. And I want to state, I absolutely loved the 12-team playoff. I enjoyed the atmospheres we got to see in college football with, home games for playoff games. Those were so fun. Mm-hmm. And we got some great games. And obviously, as a Buckeye fan, I loved the ending. I loved that my Buckeyes were crowned the champions. But I think, there were still some issues. So I don't want to make it seem as if I'm complaining about the whole thing. I love it. But I think the seeding was the number one thing that needed to change.
Yeah. And there's a couple of things I like about this. One is specifically in regards to Notre Dame. They were the absolute team that was going to get screwed in the old format because you could only get a bye if you were a conference champion.
Right.
And so Notre Dame not in a conference couldn't get that. But two, I'm looking at what would have been likely how the matchups would have been
the seating structure
in this previous playoffs if they had followed this.
Yeah.
And it looks to me like we would get much more competitive games in that first round. Because if you remember, the opening round, the 5 through 12 seed matchups,
they were blowouts.
None of them were good games.
They were blowouts, yeah.
Notre Dame, Indiana was the closest, and that wasn't really that close.
No.
So this, at least on the surface, it seems like you would get, because you're actually getting the true 8 and 9 seeds facing each other instead of what could, or a true 7 versus 10 versus what could have been like actually the 5th best team facing off against the 10th or something. There's just less of a gap between these teams. And so I think that actually could lead to better matchups as well. So I think
you still probably would have ended up with half and half.
Yeah, I mean, some of these Ohio State would play Arizona State in the horseshoe. I feel like that still would have been a blowout no matter.
Because I think Arizona State is not as good as Tennessee.
Yeah.
And they blew out Tennessee. I think Notre Dame would have still destroyed Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's at least a chance that would be a good game. And
Clemson was not great.
No, they weren't. They should probably. I mean, they shouldn't have been in the playoff last year.
I don't think they should have made it.
SMU against Tennessee, though, would have been one of the games that could have been good.
Yeah, and Boise State versus Indiana, I think that actually would have been very even, and Boise State might have beaten Indiana.
Yeah, so I think this is for the best, and you know what? I kind of want to test this out and see, but I kind of hope this is just how they leave it. I don't think we need more teams or anything like that.
Yeah, I hope they leave it this way, but I do think they will probably expand to 16 eventually. Also, with this new structure, your number one seed isn't going to get screwed over anymore. Because Oregon, if you remember, really got screwed over. Because their first game was against Ohio State.
Who was what? I mean, Ohio State was the 6th.
Yeah,
and Oregon should have been playing an 8 or a 9.
For what was talent-wise a much better team than a lot of the other ones. And so, for their first game out as a number one seed, they end up getting crushed in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
And instead, if this was the format, they would have gotten to play Indiana or Boise State.
Yeah.
Much better game for them.
One thing I'm interested in after doing this playoff once is, will the teams that have buys actually be at a disadvantage? Because they all lost this first time because they've been off for longer. I don't know. Is that a thing or was that just random this time? I'm curious to find out.
Yeah, I don't know.